So yesterday, I'm like, okay, this is weird because we're doing school backwards this week. We're doing B day and then A day. So I get in here yesterday morning. I've got everything going. It's like, okay, let me get my Google Meet, and I looked up there and I opened up the Google Classroom, went to the Meet, and I joined the Meet. I'm like, okay, let's see. Don't have any students yet. Let me turn on Go Guardian. So I go to Go Guardian and see if kids are just waking up or whatever. And I see a couple students going into Google Meet. I said, oh, they're coming in. And it's like, oh, they didn't come in. Oh, did they go to the wrong day? I'm betting they went to the wrong day because I'm like, they didn't join me. And then I see another one join, and it's like, wait, everyone's joining the wrong day. So then I went back and looked, and I had joined the wrong day. It's like I knew it was a B day, but out of habit, I guess I clicked this class, and so I was sitting there in this class yesterday morning, going, "Why are all the kids joining the wrong class?" It's like, yeah, that was here. That was here. So I'm like, okay, well, this is just going to be an interesting couple of days. Everything's just out of habit, going to go crazy here. So, well. All right. We don't have a whole lot left. Feels good. Today is May. So, May 1st. So, that's always exciting because, it's like, well, I guarantee the end is close now. We are just about done with school when you're talking May 1st. So, all right, let me put this up on the screen so we can go through what we have to go through here today. Yeah, I didn't get the decomposition and pattern recognition thing turned. I'll get that turned in. By the way, you need last week's done for this week. I looked at this week's assignment, and this week's assignment, you start with last week's assignment and then build from there. So, I think both of you have that done. I remember looking at that before, but all right, but we're in 6.03. And there's not a whole lot to these because this is basically just going over. This is our capstone project, so it's not like there's not a lot of new instruction. It's just talking about our project. Planning with pseudocode. So every building started out as a blueprint. These notes and schematics ensure that a building project is mapped out to the last detail before you invest time and money into construction. I know when we added on to our house, I drew it up on paper first before we got an architect to actually make it some plans. But I started out making the blueprint, but it wasn't very detailed. For the same reason, every app or every program that you've used started out as pseudocode. Somebody wrote a plan down before they wrote this website or program or app. Good programmers write pseudocode to plan and find a solution before you translate it into actual code. So this results in efficient programs that are easy to read, easy to maintain, easy to debug. And for all the reasons mentioned above, you're going to start writing pseudocode for your capstone project. So making this step a priority will help you see where your future program might need to be revised or expanded upon. So before you jump into that, let's start reviewing some pseudocode below and fill in the missing parts. So we've got some fill in the blanks here. So, all right, this pseudocode is for a program that will calculate weekly pay and then determine is that enough to afford an apartment. So which blank should we use here? So this says hourly pay equals an input. Which one would we want to ask? This program calculates weekly pay and determines if it's enough. So this is an input statement. Which question are we going to put in there? Per hour. Yeah, because we're talking about earning, we could get off on that and think, wait, how much you earn every week? But no, it said that our pseudocodes would do hourly pay. So yes, we want to know how much do you earn per hour. Okay, hours per week equals something. How many hours a week do you work? Which command do we need to use there? Input. Yeah, I think we're going to output something along with that. But first, we're still asking questions at the beginning. And now it looks like weekly pay. This must be a calculation. Weekly pay equals. What is our calculation there? First, second, or third one here. Hourly pay times hours per week plus the hourly pay, or hourly pay times 7. So we're calculating weekly pay. We've asked them hourly pay, how much do you make per hour, and hours per week. How many hours a week do you work? Now we're calculating the weekly pay. Yeah, that is a plus. So yeah, otherwise, if that was at times, it'd be the same thing, just reversed, which would give you the same, equation. But yeah, it's times there. And now, let's see if I can make this a little bigger. Just if weekly pay something 400, then we'll output you can afford to get an apartment. So which of these Boolean symbols are we going to use here? It should be greater than, because it just doesn't make sense to say if you make less than 400, then you can afford an apartment. It's like, no. If weekly pay is greater than 400, then the output will be can afford to get an apartment. And then which command do we need this? Because this is going to say, we'll say need to live at home with parents. But that'd be another if, an elif, or an else.
Else.
Else, yeah. elif would be checking something else. There's nothing else that it's checking. So it's one or the other. You can either afford it or you need to stay at home with the parents. Let's check it out. Nice work. This nice simple pseudocode kind of solves the problem. 1 out of 100%. All right. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, let's get to page 2, which there's only 3 pages here. The planning process. Now, a program is only as good as its pseudocode. That's why 3 different programming teams have been hard at work writing pseudocode for programs to solve the following problems. Problem 1 that we've looked at, where students are not choosing majors yet. Humanitech, trying to identify the next location to really help villages and places that need technology. And then the Happy Tails, finding long-term homes for their pets without people keeping returning pets. So during this process, all 3 teams have run into another problem. They are stuck and need your help. So select your team below. So this is based on what you chose last week when you started all of this. Review its problem overview and pseudocode progress. Then as you review, think about how to complete the pseudocode, including anything that's missing or something that might be incorrect in the pseudocode they've written. So consider any of the research you've completed, because last week you kind of come up with some research questions, kind of solve the problem, and think of ways you can make the pseudocode better. So like Team College, that gives the overview again. This is the same thing we've seen the last couple of weeks. And here's their pseudocode. Create a menu function asking for the user to make a selection. Create a menu of options. Now, it doesn't really, we probably need better pseudocode to figure out what kind of options we're looking for in this menu. Create a function that finds the average of a list using your research. Get the average grade from the last 5 math quizzes. This is a sample. Print the average of the list. Create a quiz function that responds with feedback depending on user input, and display information on popular majors. So I don't know. They might be off track on if we're trying to help students find their major, do they really need the average grade from the last 5 math quizzes? I don't know, unless they're going to major in calculus or something and they have low math scores. So I don't know if maybe they're on the right track or maybe on the wrong track with some of that pseudocode. But that's the progress this team has made so far. On the Humanitech, create a menu function asking for a user to make a selection. Print a menu of options. Create a function that finds the average of a list. Print average of the list. Create a survey function to decide which country is most in need depending on user input. And display research to important questions. So yeah, they probably need some more detail in there. They're like, okay, we'll need some kind of menu, some kind of options, some kind of average or something. So they've got to start, but need some more help there. On the Happy Tails, create a menu asking for user to make a selection. Print a menu of options. Create a function that finds the average age of a pet in the shelter. Print average. Oh, print the average. Create a function that analyzes the user's personality and matches him or her with a pet depending on user input. Okay, so this week they're giving us some pseudocode that has been started for whichever project you're choosing. And you've got to look at how can we make it better? How can we correct things that are going on the wrong path? And that's the end of the lesson. So let's look. I have put a template in here in our Google Classroom. Week 34. There it is. I'm like, where's it at? So before you begin, your capstone project will include assignments that you will need to reference in future lessons. Be sure you got a project folder. 2 parts. Part 1, copy and paste your previously completed research questions. So that's from last week's assignment. So bring your last week's questions and put them here, copy and paste them. And then part 2, begin to plan your final program using pseudocode. Continue with the same scenario used up here in your previous research and use the following guidelines. Your program should include an interactive menu for users to select options. And that's what the pseudocode has on what they've started. But this says use your previous research to help figure out what questions you're going to have on there, right? Function to calculate the average of a list, a function to display the average back to the user, an interactive quiz or survey that responds with feedback depending on user input using your questions. You're going to put those questions in your program that you figured out might be useful to help them figure out a major or figure out which pet they need or figure out which town to help. A function to display research and anything that's needed for calculations or input or output. So just write pseudocode, put it below. And then they just repeated the 3 options in case they want to keep that where we don't have to go look it up. It keeps repeating it every week for us. So here are the 3 options once again. So this is just taking what research you did last week, figuring out what kind of questions are good, and we're starting to turn it into some pseudocode, which means next week we'll probably write a program to match your pseudocode. But piece by piece, we're just building this week by week, just kind of going through the proper steps on how you would do something like this. Doing our research last week. This week we're going to say, okay, with this research, here's what kind of program I probably could use, and then we'll write the program and get there. So kind of cool, kind of breaking this down. It's kind of how a lot of projects work in college. You got to step by step to put the pieces together. So this is a nice kind of building block for us to learn how this process should work most of the time. But that's all we got for this week. We're just slowly building up to our final project and going to be done with the class. So good job. Everyone's keeping up, doing great. See you guys later on.